I'm always really excited to be here at our Federal Ignite and have an opportunity to talk to all of you. I am the Chief Product Officer for Palo Alto Networks and have been with the company for well over 13 years now, so since pretty much the beginning. And I really want to kind of share some of the things that I think are both very important purely from from our perspective, but also where they really intersect with what I think a lot of you are talking about and thinking about, and try to show where there's this alignment. And so just to sort of set the context, I'm going to make some really obvious observations that all of you, I think, will go, yeah, duh, that's okay. I think these are important to always be front and center, and they set up some of the things I'm going to talk about today, right? So there are too many vendors. You're probably constantly feeling inundated by them. Those vendors produce far too many tools. Those tools create massive numbers of alerts. And then all those alerts go to some poor group of people who manually has to work on them, right? That probably sounds relatively familiar. It's pretty consistent across the organizations that I speak to. Now, the challenge with this is that when you juxtapose this with what the attack landscape looks like, with attackers getting more and more automated, they're using machine learning and AI, they're getting more sophisticated, that's a problem. And it results in something that's really obvious, and we've all seen this in the news over the last many years, which is it's not good news. In a lot of cases, attackers are winning. But it also shouldn't be a surprise if you believe the assumptions and the observations I started with and the trends we're seeing in terms of how the attackers have evolved. And so what I'd like to talk about this afternoon is sort of some new thoughts and approaches to how we think about cybersecurity and the things that we're focused on and the things that we're building, okay? Now, there's a few core principles that will be consistent as I talk through what we do. Being best in class, being tightly integrated, and being highly automated, okay? Now, the first two often aren't spoken together. Normally, we think of being best in class and being integrated as being trade-offs you have to decide between. I'm going to talk about how they actually can come together. And I'm going to talk about them across what we consider to be our three pillars of focus. First, securing the enterprise. You can think of this as where Palo Alto Networks really started, with next-gen firewalls providing a next generation of network security, coupled with how we see the journey to the cloud that really all of you are at some stage of progressing on, and how we help secure that journey, embrace it, and make it possible and safe. And then lastly, what we talk about in securing the future, which is really about data, analytics, and automation as some of the core principles for how cybersecurity will be done in the future. And while all of these are related, they also are able to operate semi-independently in order to make sure they're moving at the speed they need to move at. Okay, so let's start with securing the enterprise from a next-gen firewall perspective. Now, what Palo Alto Networks did, for those of you who don't know our history, is we really changed the whole game of what network security looks like. It was going down a path where every network security capability was a separate device, or you could have mediocre capabilities consolidated together. Those were your two choices. We really revolutionized this space and said you can actually have best-in-class capabilities that are tightly integrated, and that's what we defined as the next-gen firewall. And over time, this was applied against many different locations of the enterprise. The challenge, though, is the capabilities that are needed to be successful keep growing. And the locations that it needs to be applied against continues to expand out to remote locations, mobile users, et cetera. And so relative to this setup, what are some of the core things that we're doing to evolve our platform to meet the needs that you have into the future? The first is the form factors. Where this industry used to be was very hardware-centric. can have a little piece of hardware, you can have a big piece of hardware, you can have everything in between, but it was a very hardware-centric model. Now, we will continue to have hardware. For those of you who have large data centers and you need big chassis, or for those of you who have small branch remote locations, you need a piece of hardware. That's not going away, but it is changing. The form factors are shifting toward more and more being virtual, being software-based, and even being delivered as a service. One of the key aspects of how we're doing this that is very unique to us is the security capabilities are consistent across all these different form factors, such that you can actually intermix form factors and have exactly the same security capability. You can use hardware in your data center. You can use software or virtual in a branch office. You can consume as a service for mobile users and have exactly the same security posture and a common control plane across all of those from a policy management, visibility, and response perspective. Second is this notion that the firewall can be a platform for delivering additional security capabilities that are tightly integrated together. This is what we did over the last many years as a company. And as we look to this going forward, we've recognized this as a very clear need from all of you in terms of how do we do this for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, such that when you wake up and you realize that you have 3 times as many IoT devices on your network as you have users, how do you deal with that? Do you go out and buy a whole new set of infrastructure? Or do you simply turn on a new service? And so that's a giveaway for the next thing that's coming, IoT security built into the Nextgen firewall and delivered as an integrated service. But beyond that, we already have a roadmap of the next 3 or 4 security services that will be integrated and delivered on top of this firewall as a platform, and very importantly, across all 3 form factors of that platform: hardware, software, or as a service, which means that you immediately can get the same consistent security capability delivered out to all locations, okay? Now, third aspect, and I told you I was going to get to have the last word. Zero trust is an interesting topic. For me, it's not a new topic. I remember first having conversations about zero trust 10 years ago. But it is topical. It is getting a lot of attention more recently, and I'll give a quick version from my perspective. I think zero trust is a philosophy or an approach. I don't think it's a product. I don't think it's something you solve with a simple checkbox. And my simplistic version of it is it basically gets rid of all implied trust. And there's lots of different implied trust when you think about how security operates today. Probably the most egregious implied trust is location-based. If a connection is being made from inside your network, it is presumed to be trustworthy. Why? Because it's inside. Inside's good. If a connection from the outside comes in, well, that one's bad. Outside's bad. That's using location as a presumption. Doesn't make any sense anymore. Networks are sort of folded inside out for the most part. Think about how many different connections from how many different partners and other agencies and different users, whether on or off, different departments. Think of all the different connections you have. How could you possibly have any implied trust in that model? And so if you start with a philosophy that says, I don't trust anything until I can verify exactly who the user is, I can verify exactly what device they're coming from, and I can verify exactly what application they're using and how they're using it. That, to me, is the philosophy of zero trust. And it then permeates throughout network architectures, security architectures, identity design and architecture, into the SOC and everywhere else. Now, there's a couple things that we do that I think are particularly important to this. For example, I don't think it's possible to have any hope of achieving zero trust if you don't start with visibility. Because without visibility, you don't even know what you're dealing with. We are the best at providing that visibility. Second, you have to have an enforcement point that's deployed in the right places to actually verify and enforce policy. And that policy has to be context-based. Everything in Zero Trust ideally is context-based. All notion of static attributes go away. IP addresses and physical connections, all that kind of stuff, you basically just ignore it, and you look for as much context, real-time context as possible for making decisions. And then lastly, it has to be applied consistently everywhere that security has to happen. Because with the use of automation, attackers will always find the weakest link of your defenses. And so a core component of Zero Trust is making sure that you can consistently apply security everywhere that you need to. Okay? So that's my perspective. This is a very interesting topic, though, because it really shifts the philosophy of how you even think about network security, and even beyond network, identity, endpoint, cloud, et cetera. Now, one key aspect of this about the consistent locations that's driving a lot of these conversations in my mind is two trends that have happened to happen around the same time. Users spend an increasing amount of time off the network. Applications spend an increasing amount of time off the network, meaning they're deployed and consumed from the cloud. When you combine these two things together, what you have are users off the network accessing applications off the network. How do you secure that? Well, I'll show you the wrong way, if my clicker will work. Thank you. That would be the wrong way. Unfortunately, or I fear that many of you will probably recognize that, it started with MPLS. MPLS basically said, I'm going to backhaul everything. That's how I'm going to do security. Users got pissed off because their quality of application access deteriorated so much that internet connections were given. As soon as internet connections were given, you realized you had to do a bunch of stuff. You had to do web proxies, you had to do site-to-site VPNs, you had to do CASB, you had to do a bunch of different stuff. Now the user's saying, well, that doesn't work very well because now I have to actually do something different depending on what application I'm trying to access. So you've now ruined my user experience, and really what I was trying to do is improve my user experience with the cloud and mobility. And so tying this back then to Zero Trust and the network transformations we're seeing is this opportunity to actually deliver security as a cloud service. Now, you can build the cloud service and deliver it to your organization, or you can consume our cloud service, in which case we operate the underlying service and you simply operate the security side. But the point of this is through a single connection, you carry all traffic to the cloud, and then from the cloud, you make all the determination you need to. Where is it going? Who is the user? What device are they coming from? Are they allowed to do this? Are they allowed to access an internal application? Are they allowed to access a SaaS application? Are they allowed to access the internet, public cloud? All of the policy that you would enforce if the user was on your network can be enforced regardless of user location, branch office, mobile, airplane, hotel, working from home, doesn't matter. And so it's basically leveraging the cloud to deliver consistent security everywhere. Now, when we talk about cloud security, the term's kind of funny because you can talk about cloud security as using the cloud to deliver security, as I just did. But there's the other side of cloud security, which is how you secure everything that's in the cloud. With more and more applications shifting to the cloud, how do we secure those? So everyone has seen this effectively. This is the shared responsibility model. What is the customer, which would be you if you're using the cloud? What are you responsible for? What's the cloud provider responsible for? You can look up all the cloud providers. They all have a shared responsibility model. And if you read it, you are responsible for the majority of your security. Okay? So what does that mean? It means you have to actually do quite a bit of work to actually make sure your applications are secure. Now, when you think about building an application in the cloud, something really interesting has changed over the last few years. It used to be that the primary use of public cloud infrastructure was lift and shift. You take an application for your data center, and you basically just move it to the cloud. This is the model that treats the cloud as just another place where computers exist. That is not how applications are being developed today. That's not how applications are largely been developed in the last couple of years. Instead, this microservices architecture where the application developers break their application up into pieces, and then they use the right technology for each microservice. That might be a virtual machine. It might be a container. It might be Lambda functions. It might be leveraging a PaaS service. And the totality of the application is all of those pieces together. So, and then when you think about how you have to secure that, thank you, there's a bunch of stuff you have to do. You have to do your vulnerability management. You have to manage your configuration. You have to be compliant with both regulations as well as internal policies. You have to do all of that. How do you do that across all the different things that make up the application? Now, the way the security industry generally works, and we are at serious risk of repeating our sins of the past, is every function applied to each location becomes a product. There's companies out there who do vulnerability management for virtual machines. Great. But guess what? That's how many things you have to do. So this model is basically taking the traditional or legacy approach to enterprise security where every time you have a security need, you buy another product. Now take that to the cloud, and that's what you end up with. That will not work. There's one thing I can guarantee this morning. That will not work. Half that stuff doesn't run in the cloud. The stuff that does, you can't integrate it, you can't automate it. And if you can't automate it in the cloud, it won't work. So starting about 18 months ago, we took a very, very serious look at what would be needed to provide the optimal solution for the cloud. And today we call that Prisma Cloud. What we basically did is we said, if these are all the different security capabilities you need, and every one of them needs to be best in class in and of themselves, how do we then take them and apply them across all the different form factors in which applications are developed and deployed, and then integrate them together? And so, for example, most recently, we acquired a company called Twistlock, which was the leading solution for container security. Because the vast majority of cloud applications, both private cloud and public cloud, have already migrated to containers or will migrate to containerized solutions. So we bought the best solution for securing containerized environments. And then we've started to integrate that into Prisma Cloud. And by the end of this calendar year, we will have that as an integrated component of our overall cloud security solution. That's how we get to best in class that's integrated. No one else is doing that. And on top of it, we have this philosophy now for how we're going to do this for the next one, and the next need relative to securing the cloud. Now, we're not going to do everything. But we will strive to be the leading cloud security provider. And we will strive to be the most comprehensive. And where we are not focused, we will make sure that we integrate with the absolute best in the industry. And we will do everything we can to make sure this is available to you, whether that's focusing on the certifications that you need or working with the right partners to develop the architectures that make it easier for you to consume. For example, we were the lead author on one of the NIST special publications on cloud security. So there's a lot of effort we're putting towards trying to make this as easily consumable as possible, not just on the technology side, but on all of the other things that go around it. Lastly, I want to talk about some thoughts we have relative to data, analytics, and automation. If I look at, just looking at metrics, what many of your organizations deal with has not been sustainable probably for years in terms of the number of alerts that are coming in, the capacity you have to deal with them. And the result of that is not good. The result is the vast majority of alerts are not evaluated, and those that are take an inordinate amount of time. And if I take an example from private sector, and I'm going to give this is an older example, which makes it a little bit boring, but it's an example where we as an industry know a tremendous amount about it, is the Target example, the Target breach. Why is it interesting in this context? The attack was detected as it happened. Most of the steps of the attack were detected as they were happening. So why did everyone have to get a new credit card after that? Because these alerts were mixed in with tens of thousands of other alerts that day that just bounced around that no one had time to look at. It was 3 months later when someone goes, hey, look, that doesn't look good. But that's the problem. This is based on a study we did about a year ago, number of alerts, capacity, and time to investigate. But that time to investigate is only for the alerts that were actually looked at, not the ones that were ignored. So how do we change this? So I'm not going to go into all of this. I'm going to talk primarily about automation, but I want to put it in context. We believe, foundationally, we need better data. We can't just be looking at alerts. We have to be looking at real data. We need to apply analytics against that. I heard the panelists earlier today talking about AI, machine learning. Yes, that and more. And then we need to apply automation to it. I'm going to talk about that in detail. And then we need what I refer to as proactive response. You go, proactive response, wait a minute, that doesn't work. The notion of proactive response is when you detect something for the first time, you respond to it. The proactive part is then you reprogram your infrastructure so that the next time it happens, you simply prevent it. This is one of the key metrics for how we get the alert reduction. We took a look at some of our top customers that are using this part of our platform, and we're seeing about 20x alert reduction, or not really reduction, but dealing with 20 times alerts they're eliminated because automation eliminated them. About 50x reduction through the combination of analytics and the proactive response piece. Those are powerful metrics, because those are metrics that say the alert was dealt with. It was not ignored, but it was dealt with without human intervention. All right, so let's talk about automation for a second. So I believe that the SOC of the future is going to be based largely on automation. And there is a significant opportunity here to rethink the SOC world. Now, I put it as an opportunity, but I know many of you actually have mandates that are telling you to do this. Opportunity sounds much better than a mandate, though. And I do believe that there is a very significant opportunity to rethink the SOC architecture, and specifically to get to this autonomous SOC. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that people are no longer needed. It just means that people get to work on the things that people are needed for, and you let machines do everything else. Now, many of you actually have an advantage over the public sector in this regard, or the private sector, sorry. When I talk to our commercial customers, and I tell them we can automate your SOC workflows, you know what they usually say? We don't have any workflows. We just do what's needed. That's actually harder to automate. What many of you have, actually, is you have well-documented workflows. What do you do when this happens? What do you do when this happens? What do you do when this happens? That's actually a great starting place, because we can turn those into automation much more directly. When we talk to commercial customers, we actually have to first develop the processes before we can automate them, right? End-to-end. Now, it doesn't have to be end-to-end. You can have human intervention in the midst of automation, but the more it's end-to-end, the better. And then you couple that with the human control element, where necessary. And you tie that into the playbooks themselves. So what do we do? So earlier this year, we acquired a company called Demisto. Demisto operates in what's called the source space. From our perspective, from our evaluation, they were by far the best at this capability, this orchestration and automation of SOC. They have over 300 playbooks and vendor integrations that enable them to automate SOC processes, completely customizable. You can take off the shelf, customize them for their environment. You have all the capabilities for actually doing the investigations, tracking the actions that were taken, as well as collaborating with other security analysts, both using the internally developed collaboration tools, as well as integrating with third-party collaboration tools as well. Okay? That at a high level is what they do. Now, there's some things that we've done with this technology that are very applicable to many of you. It's completely open and extensible. So yes, it works with all of the Palo Alto Networks products and our platform. It also works with all of our competitors. And we are 100% committed to maintaining an open platform. Second, it's designed in such a way that it can be fully operational in air-gapped networks. That gives you the most flexibility for how you deploy it, where you deploy it, and how you basically consume its capabilities. Third, it's designed such that the playbooks can be shared. Now, you don't have to share them with us. You can share them with your counterparts, with people you trust. It allows you to collaborate and get the benefit of a broader network, broader community. And fourth, it's designed in such a way that it actually gets smarter based on how you use it. So that the more you use it, the more it actually learns and can automate. All right? I'll give you one example to highlight how powerful this can be. And I purposely chose what's probably, at least on the surface, probably the easiest thing you could come up with. My guess is everybody here in your organizations receive IOCs on a daily basis. You might receive them from one source. That's unlikely. You probably receive them from tens of sources, internal, external, some sources you pay for. Sound familiar? What happens when you receive those IOCs, those indicators of compromise? In a lot of cases, there's some poor person whose job it is to receive those, look at them, try to figure out which ones actually matter, which ones are high priority, and they go through these steps, many of which are probably manual steps. Which, going back to the first step, means there's a high degree of filtration that happens on IOCs because you only have so much time to do this manually. This is just one example out of hundreds where with Demisto, that entire process can be completely automated. The end-to-end process of ingesting IOCs and not just running one playbook, but actually using the context that comes with the IOCs to determine which playbook is appropriate to run. You can run a different playbook for the high priority IOCs. You can run a different playbook for the low priority. You can run a different playbook for sources that you have the most confidence in versus sources you have the least confidence in. But it can be 100% automated from start to finish. And again, that is just one out of hundreds of different automation opportunities that exist that are effectively pre-programmed. Customizable, but pre-programmed as a starting point. So, if I bring this all together, I talked about the need for best of breed. You have my commitment as the product leader for Palo Alto Networks that everything we do will either be best of breed or we'll be on a path to being best of breed. Security is too important to have compromise on capability. Second, we will consistently be focused on how we integrate these best-of-breed capabilities together. I choose the word integrate purposely over consolidate. Consolidate means co-located together. Integrate means that they're actually leveraging each other. We focus on integration. 1 + 1 = 3, right? And third, across everything we do, how do we help you automate more and more of the tasks such that people can focus on the more important things that people need to focus on? And we will do that across the enterprise. We will do that across the cloud. And we will do that in the future through increasing amounts of data, analytics, and automation. And with that, thank you very much.